Thank you, Yossi. Number one, thank you very much for inviting me here to speak. I've had a few invitations to go to DLD meetings, but being busy has been very difficult, but this is my first one, and I hope it's not the last one. And after speaking for 10 to 15 minutes, I hope you're going to invite me again rather than forget about me. Yossi actually is always, Yossi and I, we don't see eye to eye. Unlike his wife and I, we see very much eye to eye. He is lucky. He's lucky like I am, that he's got this beautiful wife. And I have a wonderful wife too. She is an inspiration. She is my real leader, talking about leadership, at home, in my life. But I am actually a trained accountant. I'm a chartered accountant. So I'm a chartered accountant by experience, by practice. So for me, for every debit, there is a credit. So if I'm lucky, that means my wife is not lucky. So you're the unlucky one, unfortunately, to be married to him. But that's the way it is. So it's the same thing with my wife. Talking about leadership and rulership, the two are very interesting. Somebody asked me, where did the idea come from? And actually, the idea came, it was 18 years ago. I was in a session in Davos 18 years ago with 3 other speakers, well-known speakers, talking about reform of the Arab world into the future. And the 3 speakers were, one of them is in jail today for treason. It was Bassem Awadallah. Most of you know him. The other one used to be, at that time, the finance minister. Then he became prime minister of the Palestinian Authority, Salam Fayyad. He was second speaker. And the third speaker, who most of the people had come actually for the session to listen to him, because he was the young guy, he was the future. And that was Jamal Mubarak, the son of ex-President Hosni Mubarak. And he spoke, and I was asked by the moderator, because I was the only non-political governmental person in the out of the speakers. I was a business voice, and he asked me, when do I want to speak? I said, I'll be the last one. I would like to listen to the others. And when I listened to Mr. Mubarak, Jamal Mubarak, 15 minutes of his chat that he spoke, and everybody was looking to the future, wanted to listen, what is the reform for the future? Actually, out of the 15 minutes, 14 minutes were spent on defending his father's 24 years of ruler, the Egyptians, rather than actually giving us his idea, his vision about the future and how he's going to reform it. So it was an interesting thing. So when I came up, I thanked the moderator for allowing me to be the last speaker. It's the worst position to be, because everybody has spoken about everything and you're left and you have to innovate, standing and talking. But for me, it was interesting listening to Jamal Mubarak. And actually, I just raised a question at the time. I said, as long as we have rulers and we don't have leaders in the Arab world, we will not be going forward. So that was something that I raised, and then suddenly this gentleman comes from his table and whispers in my ears. He says, you have to continue raising these questions into the future, Khalid. And that person was silver-haired. I love his hair. A well-known actor from Officer and a Gentleman. Most of you know who that guy is, the American actor. So he came and said that. So the idea came from that time, looking into why we don't have leaders and we have rulers. And it's not about just government, it's more to do with everything. So that's why then I went into looking into my own life, because one thing Yossi knows about me is I cannot criticize others before I look at the mirror and criticize myself. I think that's an important thing. So you got to look into the mirror. You got to look, where are the weaknesses from within before you talk about other people's weaknesses. So I had to basically go into depth into my own life and see where has been the elements that I've seen in leadership attributes and where I've seen rulership attributes during my lifetime. So it's basically at home, it's in school, it's at work, it's at government, it's people-to-people issue. So I think that's very, very important to just put that into context, although the book is called From Rulership to Leadership. And actually, the subtitle says The Brief Memoir of a Nonconformist, because I do, actually, when I look at the mirror, I know I'm a nonconformist, because the status quo as it stands, whether it is in all avenues of life, I have a big question mark on in my part of the world and other parts of the world that Yossi spoke about. It's Africa, it's China, it's Russia, it's Asia, it's Latin America. And by the way, I mean, we take credit as Arabs that we changed the title, the leader of the free world, which is POTUS, which is the President of the United States, to make actually, and Trump, after 2 visits to the Middle East before he becoming president, he became the ruler of all of the world, because that is his mindset. He is ruling the world rather than leading the free world. So the world has changed. Even in the United States today, we do have that problem, which the attributes that I'm talking about in terms of leadership are very, very important. So what are the attributes? The attributes, the most important aspect of that attribute for me is critical thinking. You need anyone who basically gets into a leadership position has to have critical thinking. Not only to have it, but to allow others to have critical thinking, which basically that encompasses everything else, encompasses the freedom of expression, encompasses thinking outside the box, encompasses all aspects which creates actually entrepreneurs. Because I believe an entrepreneur is someone without critical thinking is not an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur without freedom of expression is not an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur without actually being allowed to raise every question that he needs to raise and he has in his mind, be it the most stupid question, is not an entrepreneur. Dissent, by definition, is basically an element which allows entrepreneurs to become really where they are and to improve and to push the ante forward. So critical thinking is an important factor. And for me, in the Arab world and the rest of the world that I've been dealing with, a lot of places, unfortunately, that is non-existent. Non-existent for a lot of reasons. Not non-existent in my part of the world because people are worried that if you think critically, you create a problem for the others. You create a problem for the person who is above the law. And I have a statement that I make all the time is that there's no point to have, you can have, I mean, in a lot of countries in the world, including the Arab world, you have the best laws that you can get into every aspect, whether it is company law, whether it is criminal law, whatever, the best laws are there written. But unfortunately, when you have one person above the law, there is no law. And that's the problem that I see in my part of the world and a lot of parts of the world, that because you have people above the law, there is no law. And the law is by whims of the people who are above the law. And leadership, I mean, there's a lot where you say, okay, he's a born leader. He is somebody who has come through this position of training or whatever to become a leader. Okay, he has got all those attributes of open-mindedness, of being a listener and being responsive, and all these aspects and attributes. He's learned it through his life, through his work, or through her life, through her work, to become actually in a position of leadership. There's a big difference between that and people born into a leadership position. Most of the people that we see in the Arab world today, not all, but most, are born in a leadership position. That does not mean they are leaders. That does not mean they know how to lead. That is an important factor. And I always use an example. It's not a question of dictatorship or democracy. You can have someone like Lee Wan-Kyu. I mean, we all know Lee Wan-Kyu. We've all read about Lee Wan-Kyu. We've all, the older ones, we've met Lee Wan-Kyu when he was alive. The guy was ruthless, okay? He was a dictator in real terms, but he was a leader. He took the country from where it was to where it is, to a developed country, by actually really having the attributes of leadership. And he allowed, as we were talking earlier, Yossi and myself, and he allowed a bit of freedom of expression in the specific parts of the country in a park, just like Hyde Park, for people to express themselves freely. So it does not mean that you have to be democratic to be a leader. And now that brings me to what's happening today in Israel. I mean, today it's a scary time with a new government. This is from my personal view. I am one of my excellent friends from Israel is his namesake Yossi. I mean, he's a I'm not liberal, by the way. I'm very much a fundamentalist in my mindset. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about aspects of adhering to certain things, unlike Yossi. But I do think, actually, it's going to be a problem. We were discussing this issue that, unfortunately, if it's going to happen, years back in 2005, what are the negative things? And 2005, by the way, was a good time. Everybody was looking at the future positively because things were happening, whether it was in the Arab world as a whole, and that was all because unfortunately, of 9/11. As a subsequent to 9/11, the Arab world was pushed into reform discussion in terms of creating, and there was the first Arab development UNDP report on the Arab world, which was written by the Arabs, showed basically the deficit in the Arab world. Specifically, actually, when you look at all those deficits, very much deficit in leadership perspective, and one of them was the women deficit, which is actually, that was 2001, and today we are in 2023. If somebody does the same report, you'll find the same deficit. And as a response to that deficit of getting women into a position of, be it board members, be it whatever, in terms of allowing them to be part of the society, what happened in the Arab world, suddenly the first lady in each country became the most intelligent person in the country, like the first person in the country being the most intelligent man, then suddenly we have the first lady becoming the most intelligent person in the country. That is the attitude, that's the mindset, which unfortunately is getting us nowhere, and brings me to Ibn Khaldun, where, and luckily he's an Arab, saying things centuries ago, where no dynasty can survive more than 3 generations without evolving itself. And one thing I do not see, and I'm a firm believer, and the book talks about the evolution side of things, that we don't need revolution, we need evolution. And I remember King Abdullah of Jordan, and first meeting after the Arab Spring, which was in the Dead Sea, actually stood up in front of everybody and said, I don't believe, and we don't believe in revolution, we believe in evolution. And he's right. But now that is around 12 years ago. It was, I remember, October 2011. That was 12 years ago, nearly. And when I look at the list of the evolution which has happened, matter of fact, it goes from E to D. It's a devolution. We've not had any evolution from then on. So the thing is, all that is going to create a problem. Now, just to put it in a context of Middle East, I look into 25, 30 years down the road. Unfortunately, I would not be around, but look at it 30 years down the road. And this comes to 2 words. It's not a rulership issue. It's a subject and citizenship issue. We have, 2 minutes, okay. The problem we have in the Arab world is that, and in 25 years ago, suddenly you're going to find 25 million Israelis who are citizens, hopefully by then, surrounded by 500 million subjects who are the Arabs on the other side. Now that is not tenable, not for the Israelis at that time, nor for the Arabs, because something has to give. And it's all about citizenry. If people are allowed to be citizens, then we go forward. And it's not, I cannot blame rulers of that part of the world not allowing it. Actually, it's the people themselves. They should aspire, they should have agency themselves to become basically citizens, and I think citizens from both sides. And that's what I've been looking at, and Yossi talked about it, that in the past 30 years, I've been looking how to get people together, Israelis and Palestinians and the rest of the Arabs, on a basis of citizenry rather than the basis of being subject on one side and citizen on that side. Sorry to be long on this, but hopefully when you have a look at the book, you're going to enjoy reading the book. Beautiful stories there. Thank you very much.